Welcome to Learning Podcasts. The tricky thing about global warming myths is that they usually start with a true sentence.
Climate changed before. Plants use CO2. Cold weather still happens. Models have uncertainty. All true.
Exactly. It is the climate version of a magic trick, where the first card is real. The true sentence is the bait. The shortcut is the trick.
And that is a cleaner picture than calling people dumb. The shortcut is usually, therefore, humans are not warming the planet, or therefore there is nothing to explain.
So today, we keep the true parts and check the shortcut against sources like NASA, the United States Weather and Ocean Agency, and United Nations Climate Science Reviews, not a random chart online.
Good. The test is not who sounds confident, it is what the measurements keep saying.
Start with the basic fact. Earth is warming, and not from one suspicious thermometer in one city parking lot.
Okay, but that is the first fair objection. Thermometers move. Cities grow around them. Records get corrected. Why trust the trend at all?
Because the trend does not depend on one thermometer, one agency, or one correction recipe. NASA describes land stations, ships, buoys, ways to compare places fairly, ways to estimate missing areas from nearby data, and adjustments for cities trapping extra heat.
And the independent records part matters. Different groups use different methods, but still agree closely on the direction.
Right. If 5 different rulers all point to the same rising line, maybe one ruler is annoying, stops being enough.
And the recent numbers are not subtle. NASA confirmed 2024 as the warmest year in its record. The United States Weather and Ocean Agency ranks 2025 third warmest, with the 10 warmest years all since 2015.
Yeah, that is not a tiny wiggle on a chart. So the first fact is boring in the strongest way. Repeated measurements, multiple instruments, same trend.
Okay, so climate changed before is true, but it is not the whole argument.
Myth 1 is the family dinner version. A skeptical relative says, climate changed before humans, so why blame us now?
Honestly, I used to think that was a stronger objection than it is.
It sounds plausible. The mistake is that it answers a cause question with a history fact.
It is like saying fires happened before electricity, so this house fire cannot be electrical.
Exactly. Past climate change tells you the cause check matters. It does not answer today's cause for you. You still ask, what changed now? How fast? And which fingerprints match?
And the main United Nations Climate Science Review is not vague. It says human activities, mainly greenhouse gas pollution, have caused current global warming. NASA ties current warming clearly to human activity since the mid-1800s.
Here's where it gets really interesting. Myth 2 is that the warming is really the sun, volcanoes, or some natural cycle we are ignoring.
My instinct is to be sympathetic, because natural causes are real. A recurring Pacific Ocean pattern can shift year-to-year temperatures. Volcanoes can cool the planet temporarily. Slow changes in Earth's orbit matter over long times.
Yes, ignoring those would be bad science. But including them is exactly why the myth fails. The National Academies and the Royal Society say recent warming cannot be explained by natural causes alone.
So the serious claim is not nature does nothing. It is nature was checked.
Right. And volcanoes are a bad escape hatch. NASA says human activity emits more than 100 times as much CO2 as all volcanoes combined.
Wait, really? More than 100 times?
Yeah, I think that gap is the shortcut killer. Volcanoes are dramatic. They are not secretly out-emitting civilization.
Myth 3 is the snowstorm argument. If it is freezing where I live, how can the planet be warming?
NASA's weather versus climate distinction helps. Weather is local and short-term. Climate is the longer-term average, usually over decades.
Right. A cold week is not fake. It is just not the same kind of evidence as a multi-decade global trend.
The cleaner mental model is a loaded average. Individual days still bounce around, but the baseline those days bounce around is moving.
Loaded average is good. The weather still bounces, but the floor it bounces from has shifted.
And that cuts both ways. One hot day also does not prove the theory. The case is the pattern across land, ocean, ice, atmosphere, and time.
I love that. The strongest evidence sounds boring. Decades, averages, instruments, repeated measurements, not one dramatic day.
Fact 2. CO2 matters because it traps heat. Not because outdoor CO2 is poison at normal concentrations, but because it changes Earth's energy balance.
So the point is not CO2 is poison. It is more like extra insulation?
Exactly. The natural greenhouse effect keeps Earth livable. Extra heat-trapping gas that lingers adds insulation and changes the balance.
Okay, but how much extra insulation are we talking about? A tiny change or a big one?
The United States Weather and Ocean Agency says, before industry, CO2 was about 280 parts per million or less. When continuous measurements began at a long-running station in Hawaii in 1958, it was already about 315. In 2024, the global average was about 423.
So parts per million is just the counting unit. The comparison is the useful part. Before industry, 1958, now. The line has moved a lot.
Exactly. The decimal is not the point. The jump is. The useful comparison is past versus now. We have added a lot of extra insulation in a very short slice of Earth's history.
That lands. The issue is imbalance, not demonizing a molecule.
That leads to myth 4. CO2 is plant food. End of story.
Right. The bumper sticker version.
Oh, right. True phrase, false ending.
Plants do use CO2, but the United States Weather and Ocean Agency says natural absorbers, including plants and oceans, remove about half of fossil fuel CO2. The rest stays in the atmosphere.
So plants are helping, but they are not a magic delete key.
Exactly. Plant growth is limited by water, nutrients, heat stress, pests, fire, and land use. More CO2 can help some plants, but it does not erase those limits.
The United Nations Climate Panel also says that as CO2 pollution increases, land and ocean absorbers are projected to take up a smaller share.
That is the opposite of the plants will handle it story.
Right. The sponge is helping, but the faucet is still running.
That is the myth in one sentence.
Here's where it gets really interesting. Myth 5 is that climate models are just guesses.
The careful skeptic version I hear is, if weather forecasts miss next week, why should I trust a climate model about 2080?
Good question, because it names the confusion. Weather forecasts and climate projections are related, but not the same task. One asks for next Tuesday's local mess. The other asks how statistics shift under changed energy balance.
Like not knowing the exact roll of the next die, but knowing loaded dice change the average.
Yes, and uncertainty still matters. Models are not perfect local weather machines. They depend on physics, observations, possible future pollution, clouds, how oceans move heat, and other hard processes.
But uncertainty is not uselessness. It means the honest answer comes with ranges, not pretending ranges are guesses.
A NASA study looked at models published between 1970 and 2007. Most skillfully projected later global temperature change, especially when the pollution levels and other warming or cooling forces that actually happened were used.
So if a model assumed one pollution future and humanity followed another, that may be a wrong storyline about people, not failed physics.
That is a really clean split. Bad people forecast, not bad physics.
And that makes the objection feel fairer, not weaker.
Exactly. Models have ranges and limits, but the broad warming signal has held up.
Fact 3, impacts are real. but sloppy claims make the subject sound less credible.
So, can we say climate change caused a specific hurricane, flood, or fire?
Carefully. The same United Nations Climate Science Review says human-caused climate change is already affecting many extremes in every region, especially heat extremes and heavier downpours.
But that does not mean every flood, fire, or hurricane has one clean cause called climate change.
Right. Events still have local conditions, normal ups and downs, what was in harm's way, land management, infrastructure, and chance.
The better phrase is loading the risk. Warming can make some extremes more likely, more intense, or more damaging, depending on the event and region.
Oh, interesting. That is the credibility saver. Do not overclaim the single event. Explain how the odds are changing.
And that is why studies that ask how warming changed the odds or intensity of an event can be serious without sounding like every headline was pre-decided.
Otherwise, the credibility disaster is obvious. Every headline sounds pre-decided.
So here is the clean split. The settled physical claims are not everything anyone says online.
The settled core is narrower and stronger. Earth is warming. Human greenhouse gas pollution is the principal cause. CO2 is accumulating because we add more than nature removes.
The legitimate debates are downstream. How fast to cut pollution, which technologies to use, how to pay for adaptation, and how to keep energy reliable while economies grow.
That is where judgment belongs. The measurements themselves stay separate from the choices people argue about later.
Yes, that is the split I want people to keep. Argue priorities honestly, but do not pretend a bad measurement claim settles the decision.
Once you split those apart, most myths lose their magic trick.
The standard is not agree with every climate policy. It is do not use a bad science claim as a shortcut around a real policy argument.
Keep the real debate. Drop the fake shortcut. That is the whole episode. Thanks for listening to Learning Podcasts.